and I really developed a lot of confidence in the collective wisdom of the women and men on the jury. Occasionally they would let somebody off that I think I would have convicted if I'd bet, but there was a certain wisdom to it, you know. In one case I laughingly call it the defense of local improvement. The guy had killed somebody worse than him, so. Well, I shouldn't say he did. He got acquitted, so there you are.
The library was my space, and there was just so much.
To the Harbor Grace excursion with the boys to have a time.
And we're so happy to have you. Your illustrious career continues now as a fiction writer, and I'm just so delighted to talk to you about that. So we'll be talking about Beverly's Gilly Truitt novels, maybe a little bit about your career as well.
Yeah.
And then at the end, we will welcome questions from all of you. And I wanted to start by saying, because we are in this stunningly beautiful library, and I know libraries mean a lot to you, in your memoir, you talk about how the library in Pincher Creek, Alberta, where you grew up, saved you. What was that library like, and why was it so important to you?
Well, my mother said it was corrupting me, but that's another story. I believe it saved me. It was a very small town, and it had a municipal building. It was quite grand with pillars in the middle of it, very small. And up a staircase, which was very imposing to me when I was 8 years old, was a big room upstairs that the local matrons of the town had appropriated and collected books and ran a little library there, which was just a wonderful resource for our community. And you could take out 2 books a week. So my brother and I, that was before television. I'm really quite old, you know. and there wasn't that much to do at that point in our lives. And we would each take out 2 books, and we would exchange them. So a lot of weeks we read 4 books. And we went through the juvenile section, and then we started on the adult section. Raised a few eyebrows as the ladies were checking us out, but they never refused us. And so it was my way to learn about the world. You know, there were periods when I went through all sorts of historical novels about ancient Egypt, or France, or French Revolution, or whatever it was. It was a way to learn more about something about the world, and then also fiction was terribly important. Just occupied so many wonderful hours. So that was how I became a bibliophile.
Yeah. And your mother told you at one point that she had harbored thoughts about becoming a writer.
Yeah, she was like many women, you know, married young, children came quickly, a lot of work, just never was able to realize her own dreams. And she would talk about how she thought she wanted to write children's books. Alas, she never got the chance. But that kind of was always niggling in the back of my mind, you know, that it's something my mother aspired to and never got the chance. And isn't it wonderful if you do have the chance?
Yeah, you get to fulfill it in a way. And I would be remiss, and I would slap myself if I did not ask you about your time at the Edmonton Journal women's pages. This is when newspapers had women's pages, not that long ago. And you got to cover scintillating stories about salads and exotic dancers.
So I think there was a little piece in the Globe just the other day on this, and they want to know, you know, your first job sort of thing. So this was my first real job where I had to answer to somebody, and I was on the student newspaper in Edmonton at University of Alberta, and then I applied for this summer job, and I got it, and there were 2 guys that got it, and the guys were shown into the newsroom, and I was shown in behind these glass panels to what were called the women's pages. And we kind of were locked in there, you know. We were separated. just like the old PERTA system, and there we were. And but it was fine, and I learned a lot. I mean, I learned, first of all, that you don't say no just because you don't get the job you wanted. I would have liked to have been covering City Hall or something like that, but if it was salads, it was salads. So one of my first assignments was they said, oh, there's a salad queen competition. You have to go and report and interview the salad queen. So I did. And there were many salad queens and pizza queens and other things like that. And there were lots of, there were church groups, there were different things. And I was very naive, and it actually taught me a little bit more about my community and all the wonderful things that these women were doing in the community to make it run. So it wasn't just frivolous. And I did get a bit out of line, though, because when our editor of the women's pages took a week off, I went down to the exhibition and I interviewed a burlesque queen at one of the shows. and her replacement was a feisty young woman, and she put it on the front page, and it drew the ire of the manager, who came thundering in, what's going on with the women's pages? But we weren't supposed to write about those things or even acknowledge that they existed. But to me, it was a workplace story. You know, a woman who had a pretty sad life in a lot of ways. And I was so naive, I didn't realize it was breaking all the rules.
Well, a lifetime of breaking rules, or being number one, breaking ground anyway. And I just want to ask sort of one more question about that time period, because, you know, we were talking a little bit backstage about how much has changed and how much has not changed. And one of the things that has changed is, you know, sort of choices of careers for women. And I'm reminded that the great writer Hilary Mantel was told by her doctor that she should work in a dress shop because you know, that being a lawyer would be, and being a writer especially, would be too much for her. And you were told, I believe by like a guidance counselor, that you did not have the alertness to be a telephone operator.
I still do, I don't. Yeah, so in grade 8 they gave us a little quiz. We didn't have anything as fancy as guidance or anything like that, but you know, you had to fill in, do an hour-long test, and when the results came back, our teacher talked to us about trying to give us some suggestions as to where we could go with our lives, and when they got to me, she didn't seem to know what to say, and she said, I don't know what to tell you. And I thought, oh, here it comes, it's going to be really bad. And she said, you have the highest reading retention score I've ever seen, but you have no alertness at all. And then the lowest alertness score. And then I didn't even know what an alertness score was. I've since found out that she was right. But she said, she thought for a while, and she said, there's 3 things, I can tell you this, there's 3 things you can never be. You can't be a waitress, you can't be a telephone operator, and I think she said a nurse, because I might leave the catheter in. But anyway, so that was rather liberating for me. I really didn't want to be any of those things.
And nothing about being a lawyer or
No,
being a
but
writer.
as I went through life and got a little more education and learned a little bit more, I realized that there are certain things, somebody who can read and write reasonably, there are a lot of jobs out there for somebody like that. And there's a whole law is one of them, journalism is another, there you can write books, and just the ability to write good prose is so important in so many endeavors. So I'm really hopeful that we're still teaching our kids how to write well.
Yes. Well, speaking of which, we'll come back to your law career perhaps a little bit at the end if we have time. Oh,
I just get a
forgot
bit.
to
Would
do
you
this.
like some?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank
Yeah,
you
we're
so
not
much.
doing a John A. MacDonald.
Yeah.
It's pure water.
There's lots of we'll add the scotch later. So you had this, you've had an illustrious career. You were teaching law at, I think, UBC, and you were secretly writing a book, weren't you?
Yeah, well, I was always interested in I don't know, we don't know what impels us to do things, sometimes crazy things. This was a crazy thing, but I thought I'd really like to try writing fiction. And I had no reason to think I could ever do it. But I started it, this little book on with the same character I used, but of course that was many, many years before, so everything was different. And I got to the point where actually I had some sort of a very bad manuscript, but McClellan Stewart was actually interested in trying to hire editors to fix it up and publish it, but then I was also offered a position on the bench. And so it was a difficult decision, but I think I made a wise decision. I mean, I think I was probably a lot better lawyer than I was a writer. So I know that. And so I became a judge. And when you're a judge, you really can't have any other career. So I just sort of tanked that idea until I retired.
And what was Jilly like then, the first incarnation of Jilly? Who was she?
I think it's very, very similar. Kind of feisty, a fairly in-your-face person, but somebody who cared about justice and doing a great job, and forging a legal career in a very tough area for women, and at the time, very, very tough. And so I wanted to do that. I wanted to get that out there. I've been reading so many, legal thrillers, that kind of thing. And there was never a competent, uppity, in-your-face woman. And if they did play a role, they were, especially at that time, very nicely domesticated in the sense that they were careful what they said and did and what they wore and one thing and another. And so I thought there really should be some feminine prototypes up there in that John. So that was my conception.
And let me ask you about the genre, because it's so interesting. You could have, done any number of things once you stepped into fiction, but you chose to, do you call it mystery or thriller or both?
I don't know. My last book is not as, sort of courtroom heavy as the previous two novels, and that may disappoint some people, but it is all about the law, and it's all about the legal system, which I obviously care a lot about, and how people fare in it. And this one focuses a lot on children and the parent-child relationship, and how we treat our children in our legal system and in our society. So the fiction was a way of exploring some of the things that, I'd been living with for many decades as a judge and as a lawyer, but exploring them in a different way. You can present different aspects of a problem, different points of view, without being preachy about it. It's just sort of out there, and you hope that maybe people think about it or find it interesting at least.
You can get revenge on people on paper that you couldn't in real life.
No, I'm not that kind of person. My husband says sometimes that I'm not revengeful enough, but if somebody disses me, it really doesn't matter very much. I'm kind of stoic about it.
So I'm not going to be very careful about spoilers, but I think we can say that in this book, Jilly is a new mother. She has a young daughter, and she also is faced with a case in which a girl goes missing, and the child is the child of a famous rock star and his wife, or ex-wife, I think, maybe. Yeah. And so it does open up all kinds of opportunities to examine a bunch of different areas, which we'll talk about. And in your own memoir, you talked about how hard it was to juggle motherhood with a career in law, and Jilly is finding that too. So what did you want to kind of examine about that?
Well, I wanted to trace, the arc of how difficult it can be for a woman in this case, a career woman, but it could be anyone, to find her life so radically changed all of a sudden. And it's the responsibility of a child and the centrality of a child, and the loss of your what's given your life purpose, at least for a while, because she's on maternity leave, and she has a bit of postpartum depression, and she's got to fight with all these things and adjust to this new world where she's been a good lawyer, she's been successful, but she has no reason to suppose she's going to be successful as a mother at all. In fact, everything in her heart indicates that she's probably going to be a failure. So she's struggling with that. And hopefully by the end of the book, there's an arc where she becomes a true and accepting and loving parent with all that entails.
Mm-hmm. With the help of her little support network, which
With
is
her
really
which is
it's
yeah,
beautiful. It's her found family, essentially.
Yeah.
But at one point, her nemesis / mentor, Sai, says to her, "I think motherhood has addled your brain,
Yes.
Jilly."
Uh-huh.
Is that still, are people still, like, that's still a prevalent attitude, isn't it?
Well, I think it's out there. I think I was told that once after I had my child, but not in so many words, of course. But I think that some people in the legal profession, that was my experience, probably thought that there was a period after a woman had given birth when she really wasn't going to be up to the job, and their responses could veer from being very protective to being, sort of extra apprehensive about whether they were doing. I mean, for a lot of men, when I was younger, this whole idea of motherhood was a very strange and mysterious thing because their wives did it, right? The guys I was working with didn't. And they didn't have much idea of parenting, to be honest, because Papa would be at the office for 12 hours a day, and the mother looked after everything, and she was expected to, and they'd come home, and their idea was that if somebody needed to talk, then they would step into the parenting role, but otherwise it wouldn't have much to do with them. So they were used to dealing with their wives having this completely cornered, and the idea of somebody in their office who was also being a mother was kind of hard for them, I think, to accept back in the 70s and 80s. At least that was the apprehension I had, and they just thought you can't do it all, and sometimes very, very kindly, you've got to be careful with yourself and look after yourself and so on. And so this attitude manifested itself in different ways, whether it addled your brains. Yeah, there was, I think, a whole theory for a while that when a woman gave birth, she went through depression, she went through various hormonal swings, that this was going to prevent her from properly thinking, and she'd take lots of time before she went back to her career. I mean, all that was kind of quite pejorative in a way. If you maybe some people were happy to have the time, but other people said, I just want to get back and get back to my work. And so
young female lawyers are still struggling with this.
Yeah.
It's, I guess, a reason why so many young female lawyers drop out of law at some point when their kids are young.
Yeah, I think so. And they're very torn, and they themselves have this feeling that if I'm not 100% there all the time, I'm not going to do the right thing for my children. But if you look at it historically, there have been all kinds of mothers throughout history. And at one point, for hundreds of years, aristocratic mothers had very little to do with their children, but they would probably find a way to forge a relationship, even if they didn't do all the hands-on stuff. And so there's many different ways, I believe, of being a mother and being totally devoted to your child. And that's part of what this book is about.
Yeah, absolutely. She discovers that her daughter can be very happy with a number of people, which is always, something that you find out for yourself, and it's quite lovely. I also love sort of the music aspect of it. It's set partly, there's a wealthy, very wealthy and popular singer in Vancouver who's the father of the missing child. Did you kind of go down some rabbit holes researching this? Or?
Well, my son was really into music and the whole rock music scene for a long time, and I've had other connections to that, so I guess I just kind of absorbed all of that. I hope I hope it's authentic enough, but yeah. So I've had a few connections over the years. I've always liked music. Rock music really wasn't, my thing, but I've it's such a fascinating and interesting thing, and how you live your life as an ordinary person after you have this fame and all of that was, to me, interesting to explore, and what it did to the family, what it does to the family dynamic.
And Jilly has, a group of people around her, as she has through 3 books, one of whom is Cy. He says something in this book that kind of, I have to say, I put down the book and I was like, what? And he says something about how he thinks that the days of jury trials are over.
Yeah.
Is that true? Is that
Well,
something that's
that's
coming?
what lawyers say. We still have jury trials, but they are many fewer than we used to have. And we used to have a lot of civil jury trials, which hardly ever happens now. And criminal jury trials still happen. But more and more, it's possible under our law now to even have murder trials without a jury. So, if you're a criminal prosecutor or defense lawyer who spent your life honing your jury skills, which is something very special, how you relate to a jury, how you persuade a jury, and so on, suddenly you may find that you're having fewer jury trials. So that's where Cy's coming from, yeah.
Why is that?
I think jury trials are a little bit cumbersome and expensive, but I think we're still willing to pay for them in a criminal case as a society. There's an argument that a good judge can do as well or better. That's why now you can, with certain charges, you can opt. You can say, I'll go judge alone. And if a case depends on a technical legal defense, some lawyers might say, well, you have a better chance with a judge than with a jury. I myself am a big fan of the jury trial. When I was a trial judge, I had a lot of jury trials, some civil and some criminal, and I loved them. And I really developed a lot of confidence in the collective wisdom of the women and men on the jury. Occasionally they would let somebody off that I think I would have convicted if I'd bet, but there was a certain wisdom to it, In one case I laughingly call it the defense of local improvement. The guy had killed somebody worse than him, so. Well, I shouldn't say he did. He got acquitted, so there you are.
Is it harder to find unbiased juries now that we have social media and, everything, news is everywhere, and a lot of it is not particularly, good or accurate?
Yeah. Well, that's something that comes up in this book because the case has a lot of publicity. The father is so famous. Everybody is fixated on this little girl who's been the darling of the media and her disappearance, and the whole of society's watching it, and they're all tweeting about it, and they have their social media groups, and everybody's talked about it. So how do you get somebody to serve on the jury who says, I haven't formed an opinion about the guilt of the accused, in this case, the mother? And the mother is quite vilified. So that was a concern. In the end, I don't make much of it as the trial approaches. Most people in this particular case are able to. A lot of people say they have made up their minds, but other people say, well, I can keep an open mind. But everybody will know a lot about a sensational case, and even if they say they're going to keep an open mind, you always worry a bit that, especially if the jury of public opinion has already come out with a verdict. You may remember that case in Florida where I mention it in the book, but a mother was accused of killing her child, a very young mother. And ABC, NBC, and CBS all ran parallel trials on TV with the actual jury trial taking place in Florida. And when the jury acquitted, there was just an uproar, the public uproar of all the people who'd been watching this day by day with soap opera, and each network had its commentator saying, well, that witness I wouldn't have believed, or I would have believed that one, and making their comments about how they would have decided the case. The people who, and most of them, I think, who without the instruction of the judge on the law, really carefully put forward and understood, had concluded this woman was she should be convicted. And I still remember the ire that there was. So it's a different kind of world now, and people second guess jurors. I think it must put a lot of pressure on jurors who may feel the public out there, but hopefully they can still do the job in an impartial way.
Yeah. It's fascinating for that reason, the novel, but also because, Vancouver is such a character in the books, and all of sort of, that part of British Columbia as well, the islands. Great mysteries, I think, have great settings, and the setting becomes another character, and I feel like Vancouver is. And so what did you want to, you talk about the toxic drug supply crisis in the first novel, and in this one there's sort of elements of religious cultism and things. What did you want to explore about Vancouver in this book, or in any of the books? All of them.
In any of the books. I guess I'm just interested in it's such a beautiful city. It's a shining city on the edge of the ocean, mountains around it, but underneath, there's so much human tragedy and misery, and bad things happening, sad things happening. And I'm drawn to the complexity of all that. The great restaurants, the fantastic views, the and then juxtaposed with it the street life, the difficulties people face with mental illness and drug addiction and so on. And I don't know, as a human being, I just sort of think, how do I put all this together? And writing is one way to try to tell the truth about our cities. And I haven't lived in Toronto enough to do the same here, but I'd probably be able to tell the same story. It's a gritty story. It's a lovely story. Our cities are wonderful, but they're complicated, and they're just a microcosm of all humanity, which is happy and creative and joyful and very gritty and sad and tragic at the same time.
And this is why a legal thriller is so great, because there aren't that many places in the world anymore where different people from different strata rub up against each other, but they do in courtrooms and in places like that. So it's a wonderful way of...
Yeah, and I think we're good in Canada at bringing people... Sure, we have our strata, but we rub up in Canada more than in some other countries. Many countries have developed very strict class systems or caste systems. I mean, there have been writers who said that the United States has a caste system based on color largely. And so those caste systems are designed so you don't rub up against each other, right? That's their social function. But we haven't done that in Canada so much. And at one point, I think we tried to. If you go back in our history, there are periods when there were groups who were in and groups who were out, and we still have had with our Indigenous people, which we're now finally reconciling, recognizing the terrible caste system we had. But generally in our cities, you will find people rubbing up against each other, and from all walks of life. So it's fertile ground for the exploration of this sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You're still in Vancouver, right?
I live in Vancouver for most of the year, and then I spend my summers north of Ottawa, where we have a cottage.
You mentioned in your memoir that you're friends with Kim Campbell, I believe, who also lives in
I
Vancouver.
taught Kim Campbell. I don't know what, but I taught her.
Okay, I want to know, A, what you taught her, and B, what you guys talk about now when you get together.
Oh, I love Kim Campbell. Well, Kim always knew a lot more than me. That's why I say I don't know what I taught her. But I was a law professor, and I was teaching at the UBC Law School, and she was in one of my courses. So I got to know her. She's quite a lady, and she was then as well, and very outgoing, and I still am in touch with her.
I was fortunate enough to interview her a couple of times, and she just gives the best quotes. She really does.
Yeah, she really does. She's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah, terrific. I want to ask you a couple more questions about the writing process before we move on to sort of some maybe legal business, and then, of course, we'll open up the floor to everyone. Are you a pantser or a plotter? And do you know what those mean?
I'm not sure. I think I'm getting that you either you plan it out all ahead,
Yes.
or you just let it.
Fly by the seat of your pants.
Yeah, more a pantser. But I think you need to have some conception of where you're going and where you're ending up. But I haven't been able to ever logically plot a book out chapter by chapter and stick to that. No.
That's really something, because for especially mysteries or genre books, it's hard to pants, I think, because so many pieces have to all fit together.
Yeah, and a lot of them don't work, and you put them together, and I've been blessed to have good editors who have helped me, sort of discard some of the ideas and keep others and develop others. If I had known how difficult it is to write fiction, I would never have tried. But I did, and I was perhaps saved by good editors and things like that. But it is a very difficult thing to sort of put everything together, and it's almost a miracle when it happens. Yeah, and I read a book. Some people are just masters of this, and every word works from the beginning to the end, and little things at the beginning are reflected in, and I just say, oh, that's so wonderful. And I don't think I could do that, but I know it when I see it, and I really admire it.
Are there mystery writers you love, or other writers you love, or?
Yeah, well, I just read Anne Patchett's Tom Lake, and it's one of those beautifully crafted books, I felt, that really was unpretentiously telling a wonderful story in a way that was so perfect. Yeah. So there are many people. I like Donna Tartt. I mean, for fiction, there's many others, but I read recently Colm Toibin, and he's just so wonderful at taking a simple story and getting all the nuances in the right place, and it rings so true. Every little thing the people do is real, whereas sometimes you have a sense of artificiality or a bit too much.
Somebody's being forced into.
Yeah. But I love it when it's just so natural that you think, oh, that could have happened to me.
Of course that character did that.
Of
There's
course
nothing
he
else
did.
they could have done.
It's inevitable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know, it's wonderful.
and yet it isn't in a way.
No.
So this is something to be greatly appreciated and admired, I think, when people pull it off really well.
Do you know, I'm always astonished at how many novelists I've interviewed who say they know the ending of the book or the last scene before they begin writing. Do you know the ending before you begin writing?
Yeah, something like it. Usually there are variations and twists, but in my second novel, it came as a surprise to me. But in the others, I've sort of had an idea of the ending.
Also fascinating to me. I love this idea that you are writing along and you surprise yourself.
Yeah.
And it does happen.
Yeah.
And it's quite magical.
Yeah, well, you think, where did that come from? And there's a lot more going on in our brains than we recognize.
Yes.
And, there's a creative process that's conscious. I'm going to put this word before that word and this paragraph before that paragraph. But there's when you're working on a creative work, I'm sure it's the same for painters or musicians, there's a whole nother process going on subconsciously, at subconscious levels of the brain. And all of a sudden, that will mesh with the conscious process. And that's very nice when it happens, if it's good.
Do you ever have crazy ideas in the shower? I always do.
Yeah, well,
Showers are where I solve
Many
problems.
people have said this, and I do. I used to get good ideas when I was having a morning walk with my dog. Not the showers so much, but it's when you relax yourself. Maybe you're taking a walk, maybe you're in the shower, and you're just letting that structure and all those conscious thoughts go. And then it's as though the subconscious thing that's been preoccupying you all night while you slept, it usually happens in the morning for me, is able to break through and somehow enlighten what you're thinking consciously.
Yeah, when you give it the space and the freedom to bubble up.
Yeah.
It's so important. I'm just going to ask a couple more questions, and then we're going to turn the microphones over to you and the audience. And I will say, only questions, no comments, please. We're going to have a lot of questions to get through. So first of all, you just said writing is very hard, and I am not going to disagree with that. And yet you've written 3 novels. Are we going to see more Jilly?
I don't know. I never could answer that question until I had the idea for a story. So I just don't know. I'm getting old, I'm 81. And at some point, my husband said, you need to quit. So I'm not pushing myself. But it's a possibility if a good idea came along.
I will point out that I think Penelope Fitzgerald won her Booker Prize when she was 80. So there's all kinds of fantastic...
Too late for me. I don't think I'll ever win the Booker Prize.
How did this idea come to you? Was it an image, or did you see a headline, or for this book?
It was a conversation.
Yeah.
About something that happened, a crime, and I got thinking about it. And I don't know if it'll materialize into anything or not, but we'll see.
Oh, so there is,
Yeah.
Okay. See,
So
once
it
you
could,
start,
it could
you
be a
can't stop.
conversation, it could be a book. I mean, you must know this, you've written fiction as well as nonfiction, but when you put your mind in way of something like creative, shall I say, then everything kind of feeds it, or a lot of different things kind of all of a sudden feed it. So you have a conversation here and that, you think, oh, what about that? Or you're reading a book and you think, oh, what about, look what that person did, but that would be interesting to combine with the other. And so it's kind of a process that goes along, and usually nothing comes of it. But I think if you've written books, your mind is always working like that.
Yeah, absolutely. You're always looking for what you can steal. You're like a magpie. Oh, I could steal that, and I could
Well,
steal
I don't think I would never consciously steal, but you pick up little ideas.
you borrow.
A
Yes.
magpie is a good
So you're
thing.
too much of a judge. I would never steal.
But you recreate. I mean, we all recreate ourselves every day out of the mosaic of what we're living in.
Yeah.
We recreate what we're doing out of where we're coming and going, and what's happened to us, and what shows we've seen, what we're thinking about, what we think was well done, what wasn't well done. Maybe there's something there that I could emulate. That sometimes happens.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to Jilly number 4.
No promises.
But I do want to ask just one thing about you and the Supreme Court presided over so many of the huge questions that, govern our lives in terms of, our rights as Canadians, and same-sex marriage and sexual assault and right to die and all kinds of things. What do you think are some of the big challenges that will be facing us in the near future for the court to tackle, or as justice issues?
Well, there's there's, I don't know how it will happen, but we are facing a huge issues arising out of the, I'll call it the media, electronic, internet revolution that we've been going through in the last 2 decades and a little bit more. And it's spun all sorts of legal questions about privacy, about hate speech, about falsehoods that now are treated on the same level as truth. What is truth? And about how people use the media in, or can use these new digital creations and spaces to harm others. And the law has always been about trying to make sure that people don't harm each other with impunity. That if you harm somebody else, you'll be brought to justice. And we craft our criminal code that way and so on. And we've done that through various revolutions, like the printing press gave rise to libel law and that kind of thing. And I could go on and on and on. How is the law going to grapple with this internet digital revolution that's changed everything, changed our world so profoundly? And of course it has implications for the press, it has implication for magazines, it has implications for politics, huge, but it has real implications for the law. Are we going to be able to maintain a world where society, through the law, says you can't hurt that other person without paying the consequence, without paying for it, setting the rules? That's what we're grappling with now. Parliament has a few bills before it. We're trying to somehow get a hand on controlling the bad effects of the internet, and who take all our information and use it for profit, but often are empires unto themselves. And some are now saying, well, we are self-monitoring, so we don't let this horrible hate speech or pornography or whatever it is go out there and hurt people. But that's a new thing, to just ask capitalistic wrongdoers to self-monitor. It's a bit iffy.
Yeah.
Maybe we still need the law. Maybe we still need the courts. And how we're going to do that is, it's going to take not just courts, it's going to take our parliamentarians and lawmakers, and hopefully international effort, because this stuff doesn't know boundaries.
Exactly. No borders.